Well, good morning, everybody. Today is July 15th, 2023. Sabbath. Saturday, I'll be leaving the church shortly. But I did want to discuss something. Hello, daughter, friends, family, strangers. But are we really strangers? If you have an interest in anything godly, aren't we kin? Even though we may not agree on all things, we agree on the basic thing that'll we we agree on the soil. We don't want polluted, fermented soil. We want pure soil, pure air. You know, it's an interesting thing. I used to tell people when I worked in the hospital, the 8 natural remedies. There are 8 natural remedies. You know, man, when he treats your cancer, he kills you. He gets close to the point of killing you, in hoping that he kills the cancer and not you. So he does bad before good. So much for the Hippocratic Oath. But there are 8 natural remedies that I'd like to discuss before I discuss the Sermon on the Mount and the 12 verses in Matthew 5. I think it's 3 through 10. But you can remember the natural remedies by the acronym New Start. N stands for nutrition. E stands for exercise. We know how important that is. W stands for fresh water. S stands for sunshine. T stands for temperance. A stands for fresh air. R stands for rest, and that's daily rest. You have to balance out your activities with rest and deep sleep. But it also refers to the 7th-day Sabbath, which is today, Saturday. The 4th commandment, the most thorough commandment. And then T is trust in God. So new start. Anyway, I want to discuss on chapter 5 of Matthew 3 through 10. He gives the Sermon on the Mount, a portion of it, discussing, and let me read it to you. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for the kingdom of heaven, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, in those verses, those 8 precepts, they're really 7, but the 8th one is kind of thrown in, that in the end you'll be persecuted. But if you notice, and if you break it down, there's an interesting correlation. If you look at these verses, one demonstrates our base nature when we are at our worst. And every verse from there, the first half, for example, blessed are the poor in spirit. That's where we're at our worst, and each verse after that builds upon that. The other half of the coin, the other half of the verse, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, demonstrates mercy being shown to these people, us, daughter and friends and family, strangers. No, I'm not going to use that word anymore. So, the very first part of each verse starts with us at our worst, and it builds one upon the other, and it continues for 7 precepts. But the 8th, there's actually 8. It says you'll be persecuted. But that's when you get to the epitome. If you get to the point where Jesus was, they didn't kill him because he was too bad. They killed him because he was too good. And when you get to that 8th point, and they start to kill you or come after you or persecute you because you are like, he said, they persecuted me, they hated me, they're going to hate you. Don't we see that all around us now, friends, at 2023? Don't we see it? Yeah, they hate Christians. They don't come after Muslims. They don't talk about Allah because they're cowards. They're cowards because they know that Muslims will kill them. So they're cowards. They come after people that they know won't kill them. The difference between godly people and evil people, evil people kill their enemies. Jesus died for his, So let's start. Let's take the first portion of each verse 1 through 8 precepts. So it says, blessed are the poor in spirit. You don't acknowledge or realize how poor you are in spirit at this point. He's talking about the very, very base person who is still has no idea what's going on, but he knows something's wrong. The next verse says, blessed are those who mourn. What do they mourn for? They mourn for the fact that they know that they're poor in spirit. They've been able to see themselves. It's like looking in a mirror and seeing who you really are. You mourn over it. You say, oh no, I'm really that. I'm really that person. I personally have gone through that and have struggled through it. And I actually feel very gifted to do so. Every time I'm rebuked by the Lord, I feel that the Lord is actually being a father to me and rebuking me. Just like I have to rebuke friends or my daughter or family. It's not a pleasure. It's not a pleasure to do that, but it does demonstrate a measure of love, because it's much easier to just say, oh, don't worry about it. No, worry about it. So the first says, blessed are the poor in spirit. When you recognize that, it says, blessed are those who mourn. You mourn over your current circumstances because they've been made aware to you. The third one says, blessed are the meek. Well, once we realize how poor we are in spirit, don't we become meek? Don't we become a little timid, like fragile, like realizing that we are such a mess? We become meek once we realize how poor we are in spirit. And the next one after that says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Once we realize our current actual carnal condition, and we realize what a thorn we are in the sight of God, and once we mourn over that, oh no, I'm a mess. This is me talking to myself, by the way. And once we become meek over it, like, Lord, can you use me? Again, I've always said, you can never be too small for God to use. The Lord bypassed the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He went to the lowly shepherds because they knew their lot. Then after we realize and we're meek about it, like gee whiz, bashful, like the dog that piddles on the carpet, looks at you like, oh. Then we get to the point where we hunger and thirst for righteousness. You know how much appetite will motivate you to do things quickly. I'm starving to death. Are you really starving when you say that? Could that be a little bit of a lie? When we say, I'm starving, there are people that are actually starving. You're hungry. You're not even very hungry. So we have to watch our words, because sometimes we can be deceptive that way and not realize it. You're not starving. But if you're starving for righteousness, if you find the value of righteousness and you're starving for it, just like we starve for air. If your head is held under a bucket of water, will you wait till next week to address it, or will you do it instantly with all your might for as long as you can, until you either gain the victory or you stop struggling? We know what happens at that point. Your life gives your soul departs. Okay, anyway. So blessed are those who hunger and thirst. So now we're at the point where we see our dirtiness, we mourn over it, we become humbled by it, and we're starving to change it. The next one is, blessed are the merciful. Once we starve and we're hungry for righteousness, and we start to gain a foothold from our abundance at that moment, justification, the Lord forgives us. That's that's quick. But once we get a foothold in regards to starving and thirsting for hunger and righteousness, from that elevated position, which is much lower, much higher than the first one that said poor in spirit, we're much higher than that now. From that foothold, that grip that we have. Now we can be merciful. Mercy is a measure of generosity coming from a position of strength. Remember the man who owed the king many talents, an ocean of talents, enough he was going to be given over to the tormentors, and his family was going to be sold into slavery. But the king, who was powerful, was merciful to him, until that same ding dong went and didn't forgive somebody who owed him a nickel, and then that was withdrawn. So you can lose your salvation. Even when you get it, you could still lose it. So you better tend to it, like a farmer has to milk his cows and has to tend to his crops. You can't just do it once and then say, okay, here we go. I can grab all the fruit and vegetables I want. No, it has to be tended to. Okay, so blessed are the merciful. And then it says, blessed are the pure in heart. Now, once you've gotten to the point where you see yourself and then you starve to change and then you become meek and then you change, now you're at a point where you're like Daniel or Job, or Joseph, where you're actually pure in heart. You can be merciful to your neighbor. Even if your neighbor murders you, you can be merciful. Why? Because you're pure in heart, you're more powerful. So after the pure in heart, blessed are the peacemakers. Peacemaker is not a Colt 45. Peacemaker is the man who comes along and helps others regain. For example, a peacemaker, a good example that I've heard is this one pastor in church, there was a Seventh-day Adventist church, there were these two men who absolutely despised each other, completely and fully. But he was a great arbiter. He said to the first man, he came up to him. They came to church at the same time, but they sit at opposite ends of the church. They had nothing to do with each other, and they had nothing but bad to say about each other. So this particular pastor went up to the first man, and he said, hi, so-and-so, what do you think of Mr. Brown? And Mr. Smith says, oh, he's a low-down, no-good, dirty, the sentence continues. And he says, really? He goes, but you have to admit, Mr. Brown, that, or Smith, or whatever, you have to admit he does have a very wonderful family. He goes, yeah, I'll give him that. He has a wonderful family. Yeah, I'll concede to. Yeah. So he said, thank you. Then he left him and went over to the other gentleman, and he said, sir, what do you think of Mr. Smith, or whatever name? And he goes, oh, he's a low down, no good, dirty. He goes, really? He goes, because he says you have a wonderful family. He said that? And then the pastor said, can you think of anything that you would consider admirable in the other gentleman? And he goes, well, he is an honest businessman. He's an honest businessman. He said, great, thank you. And he went back to the other gentleman and said, Mr. Brown says you're a wonderful businessman. And he goes, he did? And before too long, he saw the two of them shaking hands at church. That's a peacemaker. He says you have a wonderful family. He did? He says you're an honest businessman. He did? And peace is made. You have to be a taller person to be an intercessory. Job, when he prayed for his children before they were all killed, he knew that they were behaving incorrectly. And he prayed and gave sacrifice. He was trying to be an intercessory. Abraham said, if I can find 50 good people in Sodom, righteous people, will you spare it? He went down to 10. If I found 10 good people, would you spare it? And the Lord said, I will spare it for 10. He was attempting to be a peacemaker. Now, it didn't end up too well for Sodom and Gomorrah, but all the same. Now, after the peacemaker, the last one is, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. So, when you do all those steps, you find out you're filthy, you become meek and humbled by it, then you pursue correctness with all your heart, and then you get to the point where you're pure in heart, like a Job or a Daniel, and then you get to the point where you want to make concession, you want to make peace between your brethren or the world. You want to reconcile those who are lost. Those are the ones who need a physician. And then at the very end, this is an extra one, you're persecuted and possibly murdered for it. Consider yourselves well off, because that's a very, very generous state of mind to be in. If you die for Christ, you live. Get born twice, you die once. Be born once, you die twice, earthly and later, when God puts them down. So it's a division, and it's a hierarchy from the most base to the point where they want to kill you, and that's a high compliment. Don't think that if the world persecutes you, that it's a strange thing. It's not. It's a good thing. Even if you die from it, it's a good thing. Let me look real quick here. So now we look at the other half of the sentence. If you're poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You're promised heaven if you recognize that. And if you mourn, you'll be comforted. You mourn. Oh, am I really this way, Lord? And the Lord says, yes, you are, but that's okay. I'm right here. I may put you through a little, I may put you a little through it, just like your father might spank you, or the teacher might, give you a lower grade. And then, but you'll be comforted. Again, the Bible is meant to comfort those who are uncomfortable, like us, saying, oh, the Bible's meant to comfort us. And it's meant to make others uncomfortable who are comfortable. Everything's fine. Make them uncomfortable because they're in a horrible state of mind. So blessed are those who mourn, for they'll be comforted. And those that are meek and say, oh boy, really, they'll inherit the earth. How meek was the Lord? Is meekness weakness? No, it's power under restraint when it comes to Jesus. When it comes to us, yeah, we're a little bashful because when you look in the mirror and go, oh boy, that's not so good. And it's not so good. The way we are at this moment, not so good. So starve for it. Starve for righteousness. And if you're hungry and thirsty for righteousness, not physical food, but spiritual food, they will be filled with the word. When Jesus gave the woman at the well the spiritual food she needed, and she ran off, and the apostles came back with food, and he said, I'm not hungry anymore. I have food that you don't understand, food that you know not of. He was filled with spiritual food. So that's an example there. So anyway, the other half, those who are mercy, for they shall obtain mercy. If you forgive, you'll be forgiven. If you're merciful, you'll be treated with mercy. And boy, you better be merciful to your neighbor and your friends, anybody you've let down. Even my daughter, the way I might be a little harsh, that I've been harsh, and I know it. I ask the Lord for forgiveness. I ask you to forgive me. I'm sure you do. And the areas that you've let me down that are very severe, I've forgiven you as well. Anybody else? These videos are for my daughter. You're just along for the ride. So yeah, mercy. And the pure of heart. Those who have, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Can anybody see God unless you're pure? If you're not pure, can you withstand the presence of God? Look what he had to do with Moses. He put him in the cleft of the rock. He covered him from with his hand as he walked by. He allowed him to see the back of his body, and he was walking down that mountain like a sun. They had to throw a blanket over him. So it says, blessed are the pure in heart, like Abraham or Daniel or Joseph, for they'll see God and they won't perish. Pure in heart will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. If you're a peacemaker and you go to bring those who are at war together, at the peril of potentially of your own life, won't you be considered a graft-in branch into the trunk of the tree? When you graft in a branch, you use tar. Eventually, you press roots. God grafts us into his trunk and calls us sons and daughters. Isn't that wonderful? And then the last one, of course, those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So, friends, look at how wonderful it is. The hierarchy from base to the highest potential, where you're actually being killed for Jesus. You don't get killed for Jesus when you're, poor in spirit, because the world looks at you and says, he's pathetic, joke. But he's one of us. To the point where they go, we're going to kill that person. He's converting too many people. They realize that we are nothing more than counterfeit wolves in sheep's clothing. So do you see the hierarchy of Matthew 5, 3 through 10? Those 7 precepts of the Sermon on the Mount. Simply spoken, but devastating in their truthfulness. And I've kept this video below 20 minutes. So everybody, I do want to say I love all of you. I'm going to be going to church very shortly. I'm glad I was able to make this video. And I'm going to try to do it more often. And to anybody that's new or anybody that says hello, please, I'm happy that you're here. And if you want to leave a comment, that's fine. Like I said, I have a very small audience, maybe just a few people actually. My daughter being the most important, and any family would be second, friends and such. So have a wonderful Sabbath. I'm getting ready to go to church, and I'm at 5 seconds over 20 minutes. So I think I did a pretty good job. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the message. Love you all. Have a wonderful Sabbath. Bye-bye, everybody.